What if I told you that 43 out of the 45 US presidents all share the same bloodline? That every major leader of the free world, except one, is part of a massive, tangled family tree that stretches across centuries and continents? This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's genealogy. And the deeper we dig, the more chilling it gets. Today, we reveal the family connection that links nearly every American president, except one. And trust me, you won't believe who the odd one out is. Let's start with the basics. How could 43 out of 45 presidents be related? That number sounds unbelievable, until you realize the answer lies in royal blood. Literally. Most of these men can trace their lineage back to a single medieval king. King John of England, best known for signing the Magna Carta in 1215. Genealogists, especially those studying elite families, notice something strange when examining presidential family trees. Nearly every U.S. president, from George Washington to George W. Bush, can be connected through a single line of European nobility, and the roots of that tree are planted firmly in the British royal family. This discovery became public when a 12-year-old girl named Bridget d'Avignon, working on a middle school genealogy project, made a stunning find. Using official records, ancestry websites, and help from her grandfather, she traced the family trees of U.S. presidents and realized that 43 of them are cousins. Some are 10th cousins, others are 18th, but all are connected through King John. That means presidents from different centuries, opposing political parties, and completely different backgrounds are, by blood, family. Not metaphorically. Literally. Let's break down just a few of these connections. George Washington, the first president, and George W. Bush, the 43rd, are both descendants of King John. That makes them distant cousins. Barack Obama and Dick Cheney, who you might think are polar opposites, are actually 8th cousins. Even Donald Trump, with his German-Scottish background, is reportedly tied to the same royal bloodline, although some of his connections are still under debate. And yes, even Joe Biden, through English and Irish descent, also fits into the royal lineage via marriages and shared ancestors. So why does this matter? Well, the idea that leadership in a democratic republic like the US could be determined, or at least influenced, by hereditary bloodlines raises huge questions. Is it just coincidence? Or is there an invisible thread of power that ties elite families together, regardless of elections, parties, or public will? According to historians, this isn't just about luck or coincidence. Back in the 17th and 18th centuries, wealthy families from Europe migrated to America and established elite dynasties. These families intermarried, consolidated land, and gradually moved into positions of political power. Their descendants were educated at the same Ivy League schools, belonged to the same secret societies, and entered public office from the same privileged starting point. That's why names like Adams, Roosevelt, and Bush aren't just presidential surnames. They're chapters in a larger dynastic story. Take the Roosevelt family, for example. Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd, weren't just political allies, they were fifth cousins. And Franklin married Eleanor Roosevelt, who was Theodore's niece. These bloodlines weren't just symbolic, they were strategic. Now let's fast forward. Bridget's project caught public attention, not because she discovered something entirely new, but because she confirmed something historians and elites had quietly known for centuries. Power is inherited, even in America. Her work revealed that the United States presidency, far from being a reflection of random public choice, may be part of a much older system of privilege, a monarchy in disguise. To clarify, this doesn't mean every president knew they were related. But genealogical records don't lie. Through marriage, war, treaties, and land grabs, the power centers of the Western world have always remained in the family. But here's where things get interesting. In this long list of family connections, stretching across centuries, geography, and racial backgrounds, there is one man who stands completely alone. Not a single drop of royal blood. No distant cousin from King John. No tie to any noble family tree. And that man is, well, we'll get to him in section 2. Before we reveal who he is, we have to understand what makes his rise to power so unique. Because to be president of the United States without any ancestral ties to the elite, that's more than unusual. It's historic. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we need to look closer at how these royal bloodlines shaped American history, policy, and even war. Because the more you understand about the shared ancestry of American presidents, the more it feels like they were never strangers fighting for power, but siblings passing a crown one to the next. Now that we know 43 U.S. presidents are part of the same extended family tree, the obvious question is, so what? Does it really matter if George Washington and George Bush were distant cousins? If Barack Obama and Abraham Lincoln share royal ancestors? Yes, it matters. And here's why. Power, real power, is rarely random. Across history, the people who rise to the top tend to come from the same families. Not because of fate or coincidence, but because those families pass down more than just DNA. They pass down wealth, education, connections, land, and most importantly, legacy. The American Revolution was supposed to end monarchies. The idea was to break free from kings and queens and give power to the people. But what happened instead? Families like the Adamses, Roosevelts, and Bushes built modern dynasties. These weren't kings in name, but in influence they were close. Presidential dynasties. Coincidence or control? Take the Bush family. George H.W. Bush served as vice president, then president. His son George W. Bush became president just 8 years later. But go back further, and you'll find their ancestors were connected to English royalty, early colonial leaders, and elite American institutions. Even Prescott Bush, George H.W.'s father, was a powerful U.S. senator with ties to finance and secret societies. Then there's the Adams family, John Adams, second president, and John Quincy Adams, sixth president. Not only were they father and son, but they descended from New England Puritans and held influence from the moment America was founded. The Roosevelts? Same story. One family, two presidencies, and deep roots in Dutch-American aristocracy. Even families that seem unrelated by name often connect through marriage or ancestral ties. The Harrisons, William Henry Harrison, ninth president, and his grandson Benjamin Harrison, 23rd, came from one of Virginia's most prominent families, deeply tied to land, slavery, and politics. And let's not forget Franklin D. Roosevelt and Theodore Roosevelt. Not only were they cousins, but they were part of a massive interwoven network of elite East Coast families. Their legacies shaped 2 world wars and the Great Depression. That's not just family history, that's global impact. All of this shows a pattern. From the colonial era through the 21st century, those with bloodlines to European aristocracy kept showing up in America's highest office. Even if the U.S. doesn't have kings, these men inherited king-like power. Not because the Constitution said so, but because history made it so. Behind the scenes, secret societies and lineage-based access. Now here's where things get even more intriguing. Many of these presidents were part of elite organizations that selected members based on ancestry, not merit. Let's talk about Skull and Bones, Yale University's most secretive and powerful society. George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush were both members. So were other prominent politicians, bankers, and media moguls. Why does that matter? Because Skull and Bones isn't just a college club. It's a gateway to global influence, and membership is often tied to family background. If your dad, grandfather, or cousin was a member, you're more likely to get in. It's like a royal lineage, but hidden behind secret handshakes and dark oak doors. Other presidents belonged to the Freemasons, another organization steeped in symbolism, secrecy, and, you guessed it, family ties. George Washington was a Mason. So was James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, and Harry Truman. While membership doesn't prove anything illegal, it does suggest that these men were moving in very similar, very elite circles. These groups may not be passing a literal crown, but what they do pass is just as powerful. Networks of influence, early grooming for leadership, and access to resources that most Americans never see. And then there was one, the outlier president. In the middle of this tangled tree of inherited power, one man stands out. One president whose roots don't stretch back to medieval Europe. One man who didn't share a drop of noble blood with the other 43. That man is Martin Van Buren, the 8th President of the United States. Why does Van Buren stand apart? For starters, his ancestry is 100% Dutch, not English. His family came from the Netherlands and settled in New York. Unlike the other presidents who descended from British or French nobility, Van Buren's bloodline traces back to working-class immigrants, not royalty. He was born in Kinderhook, New York, to a tavern keeper and a farmer's daughter. He spoke Dutch as his first language, making him the only U.S. president who didn't grow up speaking English at home. And most importantly, genealogists have found no link between Van Buren and King John of England. He is the only president who does not share that royal ancestry. No cousins, no distant ties, no bloodline advantage. He truly was an outlier. Why Van Buren's independence matters. Martin Van Buren's presidency isn't the most famous. He served just one term and faced major economic challenges. But his background matters because it proves the rule by being the exception. He didn't ride into office on a family name. He didn't belong to an old money dynasty. He didn't benefit from royal ties, aristocratic marriages, or Ivy League grooming. He rose through political skill alone. And that makes him a threat to the idea that only the chosen bloodlines can lead. In many ways, Van Buren was the closest thing to a true self-made president. His rise reminds us what democracy was supposed to be. Leadership by the people, not by the crown. We've explored the strange reality that 43 U.S. presidents are all related by blood, connected through one royal ancestor, King John of England. And we've met the lone outlier, Martin Van Buren, the only president with no ties to that ancestral elite. But here's the real question. What does this mean today? Is it just a historical curiosity? Or does it still shape our democracy? To answer that, we have to think bigger. This isn't just about bloodlines. It's about how power is passed down, how systems are built to keep it within certain circles, and how leadership in America may be more about who you are than what you do. Presidents and privilege. The cycle continues. Let's take a closer look at recent presidents. George W. Bush came from a family of senators, vice presidents, and oil tycoons. Barack Obama, although often seen as a self-made figure, has confirmed distant ties to multiple presidents through his mother's lineage. Donald Trump's ancestral records trace to European nobility through his Scottish and German roots. Again, not a direct bloodline to King John, but still connected to Old World aristocracy. Joe Biden, born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, comes from Irish ancestry but, interestingly, is also reported to have distant ties to the same royal line through marriages and colonial ancestors. Even when we try to elect outsiders, the same old names and bloodlines reappear. Look at the families that dominate politics: Clintons, Bushes, Kennedys. Every few election cycles, someone from those families steps back into the spotlight. It's not always about policy, it's about legacy, money, and brand recognition. This is what historians call the hidden monarchy of America. It may not look like a king wearing a crown, but it behaves like one. The last name becomes your armor. The bloodline becomes your entry pass. The scary part? Most Americans have no idea. We vote thinking we're choosing freely, but what if we're just choosing between two cousins every time? The media, the money, and the messaging. Let's take it even deeper. Who controls the media networks that shape public opinion during elections? Who funds the campaigns, sets the agendas, writes the policies behind the scenes? Often, it's people connected, directly or indirectly, to the same elite families. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are public facts. Political dynasties have donors, media allies, and think tanks that help them stay on top. And remember, connections aren't just genetic. They're also educational and institutional. Many presidents, regardless of party, went to the same Ivy League schools. Harvard, John Adams, John F. Kennedy, both Bushes, and Barack Obama. Yale, William Taft, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton Law School. They belonged to the same elite clubs. They married into similar families. They lived in the same gated communities and summered in the same resorts. This creates what sociologists call a power echo chamber, where ideas, values, and influence bounce within the same circle for generations. So even when we believe we're choosing change, we may just be recycling power among the same global bloodline. That's why Martin Van Buren stands out. Like a lightning bolt in a storm. He didn't have a family name to lean on. He wasn't part of any inherited empire. He rose through local politics, grassroots organizing, and his work in law and governance. He's proof that it's possible, but also proof of how rare it is. Why the outlier president still inspires today. In a time where politics feels more controlled, more rehearsed, and more pre-decided than ever, Martin van Buren's story matters. He came from immigrant stock. He spoke Dutch before English. He was a tavern keeper's son, not a general, not a banker, not a land baron. His rise wasn't polished by prep schools or elite clubs. It was forged through grit, intellect, and resilience. Van Buren's legacy challenges the myth that only a select few can rule. It reminds us that true democracy isn't about bloodlines, it's about breaking them. And maybe that's the point of this entire story. Understanding the genealogy of U.S. presidents isn't about pointing fingers or fueling conspiracy theories. It's about recognizing patterns. It's about asking hard questions. Why do we keep seeing the same families rise to power? Why are so many presidents connected through ancient European monarchs? And most importantly, what can we do about it? Because once we see the pattern, we can start to break it. We can demand transparency. We can support leaders who didn't inherit their platform but earned it. We can challenge the idea that only a certain class, or a certain family, has the right to lead. And maybe one day, we'll have more leaders like Van Buren. People who prove that in a true democracy, the people still hold the power, not the past. So now you know. The shocking truth that 43 presidents of the United States are part of the same extended family tree, connected by blood, privilege, and centuries of power. And yet one man defied the odds. If you found this eye-opening, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who still thinks every election is a fresh start. Drop a comment below. Should we be concerned about this hidden bloodline in American politics? Or is it just coincidence? Either way, one thing's for sure. In America, the land of the free, royalty never really left. It just changed its name to Mr. President.